paranormal. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, boys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted. And it is October. It is time to creep you out. And let me tell you, I can do it right now. My guest tonight is Alan Cornelison, and he is a 40-plus year investigator in the paranormal research. He's been doing it for quite a while. He is an author. He's done 3 books. The most recent is In Too Deep and In Conflict. And these are all about the same building. The Moorhead Stagecoach Inn in Ida Grove, Iowa, was built in 1863. It was a county courthouse. It was a stagecoach inn. It's been many places. I think it's a B&B now, if I'm not mistaken. And this place is, in my words, crazy haunted, just listening to Alan, because he's the one who's lived through it, went through all of this, and had some experiences that, in his words, scarred him. So I'm going to bring Alan on, and we're going to let him tell us the story.
Hey, I was just writing some notes down as you were talking, just so I could remember. 1856 is when it was built.
I thought it was finished in 1863. I may be wrong on that.
Well, it became a place for the stagecoach drivers to stop in 1856. It was shortly after it was built.
Okay.
It was a log cabin. It was a very humble log cabin.
Okay.
It was constructed even before Iowa became a state. And John Moorhead, he came from the east to find a tract of land that he wanted to raise his children on, and he found this grove of trees in the Midwest, and he brought his family there, and he began cutting trees down, and they created a log cabin for his family. It was a family of 5. There was a couple boys, 3 boys and 1 girl. 2 of the boys, I don't recall their name. His name was Giles, and a little girl by the name of Anna, and then his wife, Martha. They built this cabin, and one day a stagecoach comes by. It was early on, we're talking 1850s, 1856.
Okay.
And asked if he could stop and water his horses and let his passengers get out to stretch their legs. And it was from that point that John and Martha both seen a possibility to make some money, bringing people into their home, so they could rest at night. And they quite literally would take all the furniture out of this log cabin, set it outside so the passengers could sleep on the hard floor inside. But take in mind too that they also brought the livestock in, because there were so many Sioux Indian in that area that they would steal the livestock. So when you laid down to go to sleep that night after your long, hard trip in a stagecoach, you might literally be laying next to a pig. So, but that's just how it was. And that's where the story really gets interesting, because unbeknownst to John, or maybe it was known, because I'll refer to this a little bit in a little later, but the cabin was built on Sioux burial ground. They didn't know that. A lot of the trees they cut down were oak trees, and a lot of those trees, the Sioux used to bury their dead in scaffolding. Okay, and oak trees served that purpose. They had limbs that were strong enough to support bodies. And if you had great stature in the community, you'd be buried in one of these high scaffolds type structures, and in this case it was oak trees. And the reason we know that is later on, after the Stagecoach Inn began to be developed as what we see it today, Martha and Anna would have little picnics out underneath one of the trees that were still standing, large oak, and they picked little beads up all over the ground. And it was because of these beads they were falling off of the decomposing carcasses, I guess, from thousands of years.
Okay.
Over thousands of years. Anyway, she made moccasins out of this stuff. But later on, when I discovered the Stagecoach Inn, it was told to me that, hey, they said, Alan, in this case right here is a shoe. There's some coins. There's some bones. There's like little plates of food that were found in the walls. We found kind of interesting that we put them on display, and right away I knew that, there's something dark going on here. People of that era would bury shoes in the walls, mainly around weak spots like windows, doorways, chimneys, to keep evil out. And it makes me wonder that if they didn't realize, with that burial tree being on Native American ground, if there wasn't something that was affecting the Moorheads at that time, and were using those primitive ways of protecting themselves through these shoes being put in the walls, because it was thought that these shoes held the soul and the spirit of the wearer's foot. It would be a strong imprint to keep things out.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the pre-story of the Stagecoach Inn, and in the first level of what I believe is a haunting. And the Moorheads knew a lot more about it than what I probably will ever know. Giles Moorhead, who grew up to be a doctor, took care of his father in later years, who actually he passed away at the end. But he went on to write a book, and it was something to do with the history of Ida County. But for some reason, he put a really small subtitle in there, Ghosts of the Past. And I always felt that to be intriguing. Why would somebody write Ghosts of the Past when it really wasn't about ghosts in the past? It was just, kind of just telling his story of growing up. Maybe they do go together. Maybe they do coincide. Maybe there was a reason other than ghostly issues that he put that in the title, but I always found it interesting.
Yes, it is.
So I did investigate for many years before I came to the Stagecoach Inn. I had lost my daughter's mother in a fire back in the 80s. It was 82-ish, late. And we lost everything, the house or the apartment we were living in. I was still kind of in the military at the time. And this is the first time it's ever been said, but seeing as I lost my wife and I had a child to be raised, I was cycling out anyway, but I got a little early, what they call a hardship discharge, because I had to raise my child. I had no mother. And so we were set up in a mobile home. The Red Cross donated to us. Everything was donated. And we'd lived in this home for about 3 months when Melinda, one evening, I'd put her to bed, and she was speaking. I could hear her in a room talking. And, me being a newly widowed, father, I didn't want to be that hard ass guy. I'd let her play, let her do what her thing was, whatever that was. And, it got to a point where I had to, stop it, obviously, tell her to go to sleep. So I walked down the hallway of this little mobile home we were in, and I kind of peeked around the corner, and I totally expected to see her playing with her My Little Ponies or some other toy that she had. And instead, she was sitting on the edge of her bed, and her little feet dangling over the edge, not even touching the floor. Is how small she still was. And she was just sitting there, and I said, honey, it's time to go to sleep, lay down, go to bed. And then I left. I just turned and went go back to doing what I was doing, which was just sitting in a recliner watching WWF wrestling with Hulk Hogan on a black and white TV with rabbit ears on it. Again, donated. And I stopped. I just paused and I had to turn around and question what is she doing in there? So I did. I peeked back into the room and I said, just honey, who are you talking to? And I remember her, she was still looking at the closet and she just pointed out at it with those little stubby, short, little puffy fingers and kind of a pistol type motion. And she points and then she turned and she looked at me with the most matter-of-fact voice. As matter of fact as a child can say, and simply said, "Mommy." That was it. I stared a hole through the back of that closet. It wasn't very big. It wasn't a great big closet by no stretch. It was a sliding door type closet. And I could see everything in it, which wasn't a lot. There was nothing there. And I wanted so badly to see what she was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up a farm kid. I grew up, in the military. Everything's matter of fact. Everything is what you see is what you get. It's real. This is how you deal with things. And this completely blew my mind. A plethora of emotions washed over me, trying to decipher in my head what was happening at that moment. And I was angry. I was sad. I was confused. All those emotions. And from that point on, I began to try to research what it was that Melinda, and that's her name, Melinda, had seen. And there wasn't, back in that time anyway, a lot of information about this thing called the paranormal. I went to the library and I tried to find as much information on it as I could. I wanted to, if it was possible, try to recreate what Melinda had seen so I could see it for myself. I desperately wanted to say, "I love you" one more time to that person that we both loved and cherished in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And going to the library, hey, you got stuff about the paranormal, and suddenly you grow a second and a third head, because people they didn't embrace it like they do today. You were kind of an odd duck when you were talking about or wanted to know anything about ghosts and how to find them. And I found out that there was a group of, or at least two individuals by the name of the Warrens that had some articles, or magazine articles and things that I kind of read about different techniques and things that they did and what she did and what he did, and learned about EVPs and what happened next was just remarkable. You get one person. It just takes one person to recognize that you're learning about something. And they come to you and they say, "Hey, Alan, I know that you're like learning about ghosts. I know a family that's having a problem with a ghost. Can you go over, maybe check it out?" And it's like, I don't really know anything about ghosts. I'm just trying to figure out what happened in my own life. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Can you check it out anyway? And I thought, this is an opportunity for me. Maybe I can get Teresa to come back in this investigation. I guess you call it an investigation. This search for a ghost in somebody's house. And the next thing you know, with all of my knowledge on how houses work, because I was working a lot of construction.
Mm-hmm.
I had, worked, construction off and on since I was a little kid, helping build barns and sheds and all kind. And I kind of knew how things worked, how the environment would react to structures. And I used that knowledge to help people figure out what was going on in their houses. And most of the time it had an explanation to it. It was simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for years. And it's not to say that I didn't trip across, and I do mean trip across, things that in the dark that I could not explain. I just couldn't explain it. And I really never called anything a haunting, because here in the state of Iowa, you've got to disclose that. If you're going to sell your house, you've got to disclose that your house is haunted if somebody says it is. And I guess seeing as that I was an investigator unknowingly, but I was still investigating, if I would have revealed to them that, well, I think you got a ghost in your house, they were told that by a person who evidently studies it. So therefore they would have to reveal that. And if by chance an owner or a buyer would understand that, okay, these people had a ghost, but I just figured out what it is, and they call this other old owner and say, hey, I figured out what your ghost was. It was a damper that was flipping in the wind. That person could come back and sue me for the cost of what they lost in their home sale. So that's why it's very rare for me to call anything haunted. I can say it's active. There's something going on here, something of a supernatural sense, I guess. But I don't, it's rare for me to call something haunted unless somebody already has themselves. If somebody said, yeah, this place is haunted, then I can go ahead and say, yeah, it's haunted. Yeah. But I'm not the first one to omit that. So anyway, during this process of investigating these places and finding that I was helping people, suddenly my priorities, my selfishness, I guess, to relieving my own pain, to finding what I wanted to rediscover again, took a back seat because I was helping people. I mean, it was remarkable for me to see that you just see it, the tension wash from their face when you discover this is what you're hearing, this is what you're experiencing. And that was wonderful. And I did that for a long time. Again, there were things that I couldn't explain. To this day, I can't explain them, but they happened. And then I came across the Stagecoach Inn. And that was completely by accident. I wasn't looking for it. I was living in Des Moines, Iowa at the time. I was putting in security systems in houses and buildings, everything from retina readers to palm reads and motion sensors, and doing all that kind of cool stuff. And my wife's mother got terribly ill, and she lived in Ida Grove. And she needed to be, somebody needed to take care of her in what we thought were her last days. And we didn't know how long that would be. Doctors thought it would be maybe 6 months. So we sold every bit of my investigation equipment, which wasn't a lot. It was a DVR and a K2 and, a couple cameras. And, I used all those proceeds so we could move up there and we'd have a little bit of money to live on. And 6 months turned into a year, then eventually turned into 7. But in that first year that I was there, I was pretty much bored out of my mind. I got a part-time job working at a tire shop. It was a family-run tire shop, and I also got another part-time job. Of course, I got it with the Ida County Cemetery. I was mowing and trimming around all the tombstones, which was kind of interesting, in fact, because a lot of the tombstones were from the 1800s. And, I'd read the names on them and it showed the date of birth and then, of course, the date of death. And it was just all very interesting to me. But it wasn't until the beginning of that second year that I was there that my wife, Pam, her nephew, showed up one day at the house and said, hey, man, he says, you've been here for a while. I know you love deer hunting. And I did. He said, let me take you to a place called the Moorhead Park. Okay. He said, that's where everybody goes to deer hunt. And I said, okay, that's cool. Let's go. And so we began this little tour to the park. And as we're driving through there, I noticed through this area of trees, it was kind of heavily wooded. I said, there was a house. I could see this house. And I said, does somebody live here in the park, Andy? And he says, no. He says, that's the Moorhead House Museum. By the way, it's not a bed and breakfast. It's a museum. It's all it is. It's a museum. And he said, that's the old Stagecoach Inn stop. And I just like, wow, that's pretty cool. I said, when was it built? He said, oh, it started out in 1856, all the way through the 1800s, 1880s, until finally the railroad came through and the stagecoaches kind of stopped. And I thought, I've really got to look at this place. I really want to see it because I'm kind of a history buff. And for some reason in the back of my head, I thought a place this old would surely have maybe some kind of paranormal activity attached to it. And I thought, no, I'm second guessing myself, just because it's old doesn't mean it's haunted. So at the end of my little tour, I asked Andy, I said, who do I notify? Who do I contact to get a tour of that place out there in the woods? And he says, well, you call a gentleman by the name of Steve. And I knew Steve. He was one of the members of the Legion that I was connected to there in Ida Grove. And I didn't realize he was also the president of the Historical Society. So I had his number, the American Legion number, and his name was on it, on a card, business card. And I called Steve and I said, hey, is there any way that I can get a tour of the inn? And he said, well, yeah, certainly. So he took me over there. And of course, that's when I discovered a lot of things. Of course, he told me about it was originally a log cabin, and then it would turn into the structure you see today. And before he walked into the building, he pointed over to what would be kind of just north of the house, like 40 yards, maybe 40, is an oak tree. He said, oh, by the way, he says that oak tree, he says that's a Native American burial tree. That was the Sioux would bury their dead on it. And he says, in fact, he says, Anna and Martha Moorhead would have picnics underneath that tree, and they would pick up beads all over the ground. They kind of sift through the grass and the dirt, and they would find beads, and it would be from those decomposing bodies over thousands of years. When they buried these natives, they buried them with all their possessions. So they would all fall to the ground. In fact, Martha made a pair of moccasins for one of the kids. And I thought, whoa, that's heavy duty. And so we walked in, and right away he pointed out this cabinet. And I wish I would have sent you the picture of it, but there was a cabinet in there with a glass case with a dress, a shoe, some coins, and some other articles that were found in the wall upon restoration of the inn. And right away, the bells went off in my head. People would put shoes in walls to keep evil out. That was how that's what they used to do. They used to put it in what I would refer to as weak spots, windows, doorways, chimneys, places where evil could come in at. And I began to put the burial tree and that together. And I thought, these people may know more of what's going on than I may ever know. I think there could be possibly a haunting going on out here. Then he pointed out the dress. He says, yeah, this dress was found on the walls as well. It was hung neatly in the walls. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just wadded up. They didn't have insulation any place in this old building. And so one dress isn't going to insulate a particular spot. And right away, again, I thought that was an offering. And through further research, I found out that dress belonged to Anna and that she had bright red hair. And Indians, especially the Native Americans in the Sioux culture, seen women with bright red hair as being goddesses. They had some kind of a special connection to what they believed were some kind of goddess. And the Moorheads may have clung on to that idea and used that red dress as an offering to whatever spirits might be there to keep them out.
Okay.
And they also, of course, used the coins and keys. There were several keys that were in the walls, which would, again, represent locking things out. And so I was just my head is just turning, and he's telling me more and more and more about different things that went on, and I thought, I've got to investigate this place.
All right, before we get into the investigation, I got to hit a commercial or two, and then we're going to dig right into it. You've sent some really cool videos. So hold on, Alan. We'll be right back as soon as I pay a few bills. All right, friends, watch a little bit, and then we'll be right back with Alan and his somewhat frightening ideas.
It's almost here, ladies and gentlemen. The UNX Network Year 2 anniversary at XCon 2023. XCon is being held this year from October the 30th to November 1st at the beautiful Oasis Hotel and Conference Center in Springfield, Missouri. Top speakers include host of America Unearthed, Scott Walter, plus Haley Ramsey, Sev Tak, UNX's very own Maureen Richmond and Dan Terry, Mindy Toutfast, Harriet McFeely, Forrest Crawford, and many more. And they're all coming to deliver new information on topics like UFOs, alien encounters, cryptids and ancient secrets, and real hauntings from the afterlife. Join us for the film premiere of A Haunting in Blue Hill. And don't miss the Mad Hatter Paranormal Halloween Bash, Banquet, and Costume Contest on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. So join us as we close out the 2023 conference season. Info and tickets are available now at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com, and we'll see you there.
All right, my friends, we're back, and we are about to walk into a very haunted location. Alan, take us in.
Okay. Well, as I was about ready to say, I made contact with Steve Wilkins. That's who the president of the Historical Society was. And I wanted to get this tour. And of course, he gave it to me, and I was just mesmerized. I had to investigate it. Okay. So I made arrangements to make an appeal to the Historical Society through one of their monthly meetings to do not an investigation, but research. Okay. I thought if I would say I was a paranormal investigator, because this is an older community. Okay. And there's like, in like 7 blocks, there's probably 6 churches. Okay. So I had to be really careful in how I presented myself. So I presented myself as a paranormal researcher. I did have a little bit of latitude, as my wife's dad was the vice president of Midwest Industries. And he probably at one point hired about every townfolk in Ida Grove into Midwest Industries. So everybody loved him. All right. They just loved the man. And I was his son-in-law. I never met him. I had never met the man. I got married to Pam, 10 or 15 years after his death. So I never got a opportunity to meet him, but they loved him. And so therefore they kind of accepted me, and they accepted Pam. So they allowed me to do this presentation. And I told them what my intentions were. I said, I don't know if it's haunted or not, but I said, now, wouldn't it just be cool though, if I could make contact with one of your founders of Ida Grove, John or Martha Moorhead, and I did it kind of in a manner. I was kind of joking about it, and I got a few good, few chuckles out of it and everything, and by the time the presentation was over, it came down to a show of hands. And Steve said, okay, to pass this, show of hands, yes, show of hands, no. But before that happened, suddenly, one of the members, an older member, one of the original members that helped build or rebuild this old decrepit structure to what we know today as the Stagecoach Inn, she spoke out. Her name was Connelly. She says, why? Why would we allow somebody to go back into that place and conjure things up all over again?
Amazing.
I was floored. I didn't know how to react to that comment. I was walking on thin ice. I knew I was. I didn't want to pursue it because I thought if I pursued it, it might churn a bunch of things up where people say, yeah, she's right. Why would we allow something like that to happen? So I let the statement go. I just let it go. I let it ride. And luckily, by a show of hands, and it was a pretty substantial amount of people that gave the yay that I would go and investigate, I was in. But I was only granted 3 days, 3 nights. That was it. No more than that. And which was fine with me. That was good. 3 days is better than no days.
Yes.
And so I'm collecting everything that I needed for my little presentation, which consisted of just basically a manila envelope with a few lines in it that I used to introduce myself. And I decided I'd help start putting chairs and tables away and kind of, I didn't want to just walk out the door. I wanted to show my appreciation by helping put everything away from this meeting. And a gentleman by the name of Elmer walks up to me, and an old farmer, bib coveralls, and overalls, I guess, pinstriped, faded blue. And he says, Alan, he says, I am so happy that you're going to go out there and poke around. I said, really? I said, I'm glad to hear that. And he said, no, you don't understand. He says, there's something out there. And he said it in such a manner that it just made my blood run cold. It was that urgency. You hear that urgency that you could hear the almost fear in his voice.
Okay.
And he began to explain. He says, we get a lot of donations all the time from all over the country. People send us things from the era of the Stagecoach Inn when it was actually in use, all the way up into the 1920s and 40s when it was still inhabited by people. And he said, I was going out there to add some new items and put some other items away. They had some big trunks in there that they would store different things in, or they would put it in the old barn that was also there on the property. And he said, I walked up to the inn. He said, I put my key in the padlock. There's let me see, there's 1, 2, there's 3 other doors besides the front door, and they're all nailed shut. Except the exception of one. It does have bolt locks that go through it, but there's also a big heavy table that's in front of it. And he unhasps the door, and he walks inside, and he has a couple items with him, and he walks into what I believe he told me was the kitchen area when he heard footsteps. And he says they were loud, and he said they were very deliberately moving across the upper level, upper staircase area of the inn. And he said, Alan, he says, I got mad. He said, I knew it was some kids and they broke in. And he said, I was going to chew their ass. And he says, he's in his like 80s. And he says, I went thumping up the steps, and he says, I was going to grab them children and I was going to throw them out of there and then call the sheriff. And he said, I went up there and there was nothing, nowhere. He had no glass broken, no way that anybody could have got in. He says, but I know what I heard. I know what I heard.
Okay.
And I believed him. I mean, there was no reason for me not to, I mean, I didn't know the guy. He's never lied to me before, so how do I know if he's lying or not? So I had that little bit of information, and I'll relate to that even further down the road, a validation to that. But so I went to the inn. I mean, I had those 3 nights with 3 opportunities, and it started on a Friday night. And I had a VCR with, because a VCR tape, 8 hours of VCR tape, 1 security camera, and it had audio on it. And every night I'd set it up in different locations inside the inn. And I would stand in front of it and I would attempt to make contact with what was ever there. And as I stated in the book, the sound of silence was deafening. There wasn't even as much as a breeze outside, which in itself was a little creepy, but nothing. I'm in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, and nothing.
Yeah.
I got to that last night, the last investigation. I was pretty sure it was done. And I was in the community room. And I was probably in there for a couple of hours. I'd sit down, I'd stand up, I'd move around. I had a K2 in one hand. I had a ghost meter, which I describe in the book, In Too Deep, and also another book we'll talk about here in a second. It was a ghost meter, and it was setting on a glass case that housed a Civil War flag. And I briefly shined my flashlight on it. You really can't hear me say it in the video, but I'm saying that the ghost meter isn't reacting to anything, because they're pretty sensitive, And I like them because they beep and they flash. That's why I wanted to use it, and that's why I had the camera set up in a manner that it would see it flash if it went off. And I made the statement the house was essentially flat. There was nothing there. And about an instant later, something tugged hard and deliberately. I sit on my back, but it was like on the bottom seam edge of my coat. And I turned around, I to see what was there. I thought maybe I'd backed into something. It was dark in the room, and there was nothing there, nothing. But I know what I felt.
Is that the video you sent me marked how it all started?
Yes.
Okay.
And it startled me. I mean, I didn't know how to deal with it. I had, fortunately, a tape recorder, a digital tape recorder, sitting in that room on a chair that it was next to a doorway that led into what was be referred to as the men's room area.
Okay.
This is where the men were to sleep at night. The house was segregated. The inn was segregated. Even if you were married, you were divided. Okay. The women slept upstairs, the men slept downstairs. So anyway, the following day, I found that place in the tape, the recording, to see if I could spot whatever it was that tugged on my coat. Right. And I was in such a position that you can't really see the back of me very well. And I looked at it several times, and I said, maybe it was my imagination. Maybe there was just nothing there. And so I had the digital recorder running. So I listened to it, and I had the headphones on and listened to that. And then I got to the spot where it says, is there someone in this room with me? And that's when my blood run cold, buddy. I'm telling you, there was a voice that come through. It sounded just like a child says, yeah, it was me, or something to that effect. Well, I think I sent that video to you.
Really cold. It's cold outside. It's cold outside. All of a sudden, it's extremely cold right here in this spot. Is there somebody here that would like to say something to me? Don't be afraid. You can you find you walk right up to me and shake my hand. The house is essentially flat. It's a big cut on my back, right here. That was a tug. Honest goodness, that was a tug. Is there somebody here that drove me? That was a tug. Honest goodness, that was a tug. Is there somebody in here in this room with me?
Okay. All right.
I was, yeah. And I was floored. Of course, I talk about it in the book. If you read the book In Too Deep, which I have a copy of it, it right here, just a hardback edition of In Too Deep. After that happened, I walked into the men's quarter, the men's room, and I had to sit and kind of wrap my head around things. I have my own rules that I go by, and it's to work past shock and awe, and to be an investigator, to try to figure things out, rationalize things, and of course I didn't hear that voice, I didn't hear anything. But as I was sitting there, adjacent to where this room is another room, the kitchen. So the kitchen, the community room where I was standing at, and the men's room where I was in now are all kind of connected through doorways. Okay. And as I was sitting there trying to wrap my head around what just happened, I began to hear the china plates clinking around, cups and plates. And it sounded like, my God, somebody was making a meal in there. And it would stop. And then there'd be movement. I could hear rustling, and it sounded like it was coming in my direction. And I said, you know what? I've had enough of this. This is a little more than what I bargained for, and I wanted to leave. And I got to tell you, I was so afraid, and I'm not afraid to say this. I was so afraid. My legs and feet felt like lead. I couldn't move. And I finally made my way out of there, but I never looked up. I looked at the floor. I tried to find my way out. I had this sensation that there was thousands of eyes just looking at me. But I finally made my way out of there. And it's a really gripping part of this book, that very first investigation, In Too Deep. And In Too Deep, by the way, is a very well chosen title. I used the word INN as an in, too deep, because I was in too deep. I was in way over my head. I thought I knew everything about everything, and I discovered at that moment in my life, and later, of course, after 7 years, that I didn't know as much as I thought I knew, and I am a novice in the field of paranormal activity.
Well, we got about 10 minutes left or so, and I'd like to get some of these videos. Tell me about
real quick, if I could. The first book, real quick. I wrote a first book called Ghosts and Legends of the Stagecoach Inn. The reason I changed it from this to this was because I found out, get this, my editor was kind of screwing me out a little bit of money. One, so he kind of was breaching the contract. But secondly, I found out that he was also the minister of the Church of Satan. Can't make this up. I Googled it, and I found it out. Name it Eric Berner, minister of the Church of Satan. So now I got rid of that book. These books are no longer available. I have like 10 left. And I tell people, I said, not only did I investigate hell, but my publisher was a disciple of Satan.
All right. Well, you sent me one that I really thought was incredible about an EVP of Someone Save Us.
Yes.
What's the story on that one?
Well, we were there hosting a group of people that wanted to investigate it. And in all the 7 years I was there, like 5 teams investigated it. I begged people to come in to validate what I was discovering, because anybody can say a place is haunted. I wanted true validation. I wanted somebody other than myself. And of course, whenever somebody would investigate it, they'd walk out just shaking their heads. They just in disbelief. They go, "Wow, we've never experienced what we experienced here." I had people that I had one group that had a person that ran out of the house screaming, and somebody was screaming, "She's possessed! She's possessed!" She ran off into the woods. We couldn't find her. She was in the woods, and by the time we found her, she had twigs in her hair and her face was all scratched up. She ran out terrified. She'd seen something that terrified her to the point where she did great bodily harm to herself. So, it was a crazy place. And on this particular night, my investigator Dan he just had a Sony Handycam with him, and he would just walk around upstairs. I apologize for the little background music that I had with this, but when I first posted it, I kind of wanted that creepy vibe with it. But you can hear.
Yeah, you didn't need it.
You can hear what is said on this, and I think it has something to do with the Native American ground, and I will explain that later if we have time.
All right.
Someone save us.
Amazing. That one is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I truly believe that scenes that people were there in their life disturbing that sacred ground, that they were held there after their death.
Okay.
And native, and I believe that through native culture. And just because I don't believe that, or maybe I don't believe that, doesn't mean that the natives don't believe it.
Yeah,
and that can be powerful, and that can be powerful in itself. So am I destined to be bound there someday? I don't know, but that sure has scared the hell out of me.
What do you got on this thing in the window?
I was doing a little short documentary. I was just wanting to film something, and I was just filming those pretty flowers, and I zoomed in on them, and I was going to narrate this thing. And later, when I was doing the editing, I go, "What in the hell was that?" And you can see this orb type thing. It's not on the outside. This is on the inside of the inn. And take in mind, everything's locked up. Everything's closed. I'm not in any way, shape, or form inside of this place, or had I been during this little segment of filming. And you can see this thing goes, well, just have to show it. I can't figure it out. The first one, it zooms, and it's not a bug. Usually a bug is pretty much a straight line. This is kind of just I don't know. It was wild. It's wild. and you can actually see it go past the inside of that stile on that window, so it's on the inside. It disappears behind the stile and then continues out of view. So, yeah.
One last one. I mean, you sent me a couple, but one's just going to be too long for us. But the motion sensor's going off.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Holy shit. No way. No way. No way. I walked clear around. I was on the other side of this room over there, and this thing went off. I told you it was feeling cold in here. 4.1. I got a 4.1. Oh my God. Look at that. You see that? 4.1. That's what I captured on that. And I got to show you. I'm going to turn this off, night vision, for a second. I just got to show you something. Where's the damn switch? There. I want you to look at this motion sensor. It's going to probably go off again, maybe. I don't know. But it's pointing at that wall. Right there. It's pointing at the wall. There's no way that anything could have set it off other than something that walked past it. No way. There's no way. Oh my God, 4.1. That's what it's reading still, 4.1. I was feeling a cold draft and something triggered that motion sensor. I don't know what it was, but something triggered that motion sensor, and you can see, you've seen that it's pointing towards the wall. There's no way, as far up as the staircase was, I was clear in here by the kitchen, and there's a wall. There it goes again. There it goes again. Right now, something is screwing with me big time.
That must be quite a place. What's going on there now?
I don't know. I haven't investigated there since 2018 was the last time I investigated there. And that's what inspired the book In Conflict. I was asked to return there. When I came back to Ankeny, Iowa, after leaving Ida Grove, we eventually had to move Pam's mother down here. She did get to a point where she was getting so ill that the hospitals and nursing homes up there weren't able to accommodate to her needs. Okay. So we brought her back to Ankeny. And when I left there, I said, I'm done. I'm so happy I'm done. I spoke to Coyote Chris Sutton. I don't know if you know him or knew of him. He was a shaman. He said, Alan, you need to do cleansing yourself. I did. I cleansed. I actually felt liberated finally from that place. And I was out of the paranormal. I quit. Okay. And then I was notified by a gentleman that wanted to do one more investigation up there. He wanted to broadcast it through another network. And it was a conflict for me. And it's a whole story that starts the book. Actually, this book right here, In Conflict, 94,000 words, a lot of words, but I write it. It kind of starts at the ending and goes and loops around to the investigation. It ends the night after the investigation and then moves forward from there. And then it basically outlines all the conflict that I went through in order to go back and do this last investigation, because I was second guessing myself. I was second guessing my techniques, the people that I was with, the paranormal in general. It's just so much information in there that I talk about that people say it's written very vividly, and they can understand it and they can feel the pain that I was feeling and feeling, my second guessing of my own abilities to be a good investigator until I got back in there and it was just a poor choice. And you'll read about that poor choice in the book In Conflict.
All right. So we've got 2 books available now. That's In Too Deep and In Conflict. And where can people get those books?
You can get them on Amazon. You can either Google my name on Amazon, Alan Cornelison, or you can Google each of the names, In Conflict or In Too Deep, or you can just go to my website, darkriverpublications.com. And that'll take you to a website and homepage. You can go to that homepage and it'll say, get your books here. Just click on either one of the books and it'll take you directly to that book on Amazon.
Well, Alan, thanks for coming in. You've got some great stories, and I'm going to bring you back because I know we did not even scratch the surface of what you've been through here. Not even close.
Not even close.
Well, we'll come back after Halloween, and we're going to talk some more, all right?
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for coming in, Alan. That's Alan Cornelison. And again, folks, the author of In Too Deep about the Stagecoach Inn and In Conflict. So that's one you may want to check out because this is an incredible story. Alan, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
You're welcome. Thank you. Looking.
All right, my friends, the show's about over. I do want to remind you of the X-Con coming up October 30th to November 1st. A lot of good people going to be there. Of course, Margie Kay will be speaking on the Kansas City Mothman. Scott Walter will be talking about the Knights Templar and the alien connection, which I really look forward to seeing. Of course, you've heard Michelle Roos talk about demonic myths and such as that. I'll be around talking about the most haunted of the Midwest. So we got a lot to do. We got a big costume party on the 31st. You need to be there for that. You're going to love the costume I've picked up. And other than that, I'm going to leave it for the day. So I want you all to stay cool and stay spooked. Good night.